Hi, I'm Jack Howell. I'm extremely pleased to present a conversation with Conrad Jones, who is Pittsburgh Symphony's new Associate Principal Trumpet. Just a couple of words of explanation. Our location for this conversation was in Wiesbaden. It turned out to be basically a public place. I didn't realize when I chose it that it was going to turn into kind of a busy spot. I also didn't realize how tired I was. This was the second to last day of tour. So anyway, Conrad is an amazing player, a really down-to-earth guy, really a great colleague, and you can learn a lot from him. I can learn a lot from him. So please listen and watch through the distractions. He's got some really important things to say. I'm here with Conrad Jones, Associate Principal of Pittsburgh Symphony, recently. And I'm Jack Howell. And I've kind of been stalking you since your audition because I really wanted to talk to you immediately after, and you kind of kept putting me off.
Oh.
But before we get to that, how do you get this way? I read your bio from Indy and your Yamaha bio, but it doesn't really. You've got two younger brothers who are also brass players.
Yeah.
So is this a family thing?
Definitely. Yeah. We my brothers and I started on cello when we were 5 and they were 3. Suzuki.
Uh-huh.
My parents are musicians, public school teachers, like band, elementary band, things like that.
There's your enriched
So
environment.
my mom still plays clarinet, actually, semi-professionally. She taught for 30 years, and then in her retirement went and got a master's at Queens College with Charles Nidek, like for fun.
Wow.
And now is like freelancing. She moved to Queens. She's having a great time. And my dad played trombone, and he was
So there's a chance she'll watch this video.
definitely 10 out of 10. My dad played trombone. He was like a music administrator of a public school district, and so we grew up with like a lot of family friends that were music teachers, and so they started us on cello when we were little kids, and then I think we all kind of wanted to play in the band, so we did piano for a little while, and then eventually when we were 9 and then Doug and Gary were 7, we all switched to brass instruments, and I played trumpet, obviously, and they played trombone and tuba. They're twins, 2 years younger, so we kind of had a pretty tight-knit, musical family
So
thing.
at what point in this process did you take off?
I don't know. I was a little slow going, I think, getting into it. I always took lessons and, I used to put it in the case every summer until I was 15 or 16 years old. And I was interested in a lot of other things. Sort of felt like people thought I was going to be a musician, so I think I was kind of getting into art and some sports stuff, like all this other crap, basically, to fight against that, and then eventually realized this was my passion. So around 16 years old, I sort of got into it. Doug and Gary were always very into it, so in the summers they would be playing their instruments in the basement all day long, and I'd be out playing golf or doing whatever. And
This is encouraging.
So
it's always encouraging to find somebody who wasn't like brilliant when they were 6.
Yeah, definitely not. I think I always enjoyed music in some capacity because I used to play guitar and drums, and I was really into like rock music and heavy metal, and took up bagpipes briefly, and I did all this weird stuff besides play trumpet.
So have you talked to Rian about bagpipes?
I haven't. I definitely should, though.
Okay.
That was a brief stint. Joined this little Hibernians club, and anyway. So I always was doing musical things and kind of into it, and it was jazz first that.
I was going to ask you about jazz.
That was like I always was studying classical trumpet, but hated classical music basically till I was like 18 years old, and so I thought I was going to just,
I was going to ask you about that plot of pop shows, where you've played some really legitimate sounding jazz solos.
Thanks. Yeah, I was always studying classically in terms of just the fundamentals of the instrument, but I was spending all of my time exclusively listening to jazz and transcribing, and even when I went to the Cleveland Institute of Music, the goal was to get out of New York City. I grew up about an hour from the city on Long Island. Get out of the city, study my instrument, and then move back to New York or LA, and then freelance and be sort of more of a commercial jazz player. And even my first 2 years in Cleveland, I devoted all my time to listening to jazz and had a little jazz trio there, and I would do all the orchestra assignments and stuff as I had to, but it was
Well,
it was
then
was
let
the
me
main
jump right
focus,
into my question,
you know.
because there might be a connection that I hadn't really suspected. The reason I was really interested to talk to you, I mean, your audition was great, top to bottom.
Thanks.
But there's something that you did that I thought, if I could figure out how to teach that, it would be really handy. And I'm sure you've noticed that there are musicians that whenever they play something, they sound like themselves.
Definitely.
You sound
Yeah,
like
yeah.
such and such plays Telemann, and such plays Shostakovich, and so this is how so and so plays Bruckner. And it's, on one hand, I suppose there are musicians who actually strive for that, to have an individual
Yeah.
expression and sound, but it's a little bit like watching an actor, and whatever the role is, if it's Arnold Schwarzenegger, you're never not going to see Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Right.
This seemed like such a good spot.
It definitely does. It's like,
So where I was, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the actors who, whenever you see them in a role, you forget that it's whoever the actor is. And one of the things that I really admired about your audition was how transparent it was with regard to the composer. That Mahler sounded like a different player than Telemann, than Shostakovich. And this could backfire on me, because I interviewed Michelle Hembry, and I had this idea about her accuracy, that I could ask her about it, and I asked her, and she said, I don't know, I was just always accurate.
yeah.
Is this something that you've thought about, or that you practice or prepare for? So anyway, we had gardeners here who didn't realize we were taping, and rightly so, Why should they? So anyway, you were talking about your technique with score study, chunk of the score, recording, listening to a recording of that?
Yeah, so I guess the idea, what you were asking about, like, how do you sort of sound like the piece and not just
Yeah.
like the same person on, And I think I initially got into this, I mentioned, just because I thought it would be a way to help myself with nerves, in the heat of battle. I do this for,
Exactly.
orchestra concerts too. Like, I always thought of it like, if there's something that I'm nervous to play, or if it's hard for me, if I don't have to like count. I mean, I always count, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
If I don't have to be
sure.
nervous about the rhythms
Yes.
or anything else, it kind of frees you up a bit. So anyway, long story short, I just build a track on GarageBand that's, the corresponding excerpt that matches my little score binder, and I kind of just go through the whole list. Every day I try to start about a month out, and especially on trumpet, there's only so much you can play in a day anyway before it's diminishing
Uh-huh.
returns. So I found this to be a good supplemental thing
Yeah.
to try to get some kind of, I don't know, X factor, if you will, but it was really, mostly from that, trying to just make myself even more comfortable. And I think the process of listening to the pieces a lot, and looking at the score while you're doing it, kind of informs how you play without having to like micromanage too
Yeah.
much, which may tap into this. I don't know if it really does.
This is extremely validating,
Um,
because that's one of the things that I remember doing for my audition, and that I have always taught, is that if you can find something to say, if you find something in the music that you're really excited about, then you're in a totally different place nerve-wise. It's like a street preacher who's like, he doesn't care whether you want to hear what he says or not.
Yeah.
Listen, you've got to listen. This is your soul. You've got to listen to me. And just having that feeling of conviction that you've got a message, I think, is the very best thing for nerves.
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, it's helped. I mean, I started this only basically out of desperation, because I just felt like I'd taken a handful of auditions and was just playing very underneath what I thought I was maybe more capable of, and I was getting a little frustrated, and I was like, I got to do something else to add to this.
Yeah.
And when I started doing this, it seemed to help a little bit, and so then I just kept doing it ever since. Just
It's this is kind of a Rosetta Stone. I'm really interested in this because, I'm glad for you that you've discovered that at your age, as opposed to me having discovered it at my age. But I remember finding a period in auditions where the more I cared about it, the harder it was to play.
Yeah.
You know, like if it were an audition that I didn't really care about, or if I knew at some level that it was, you know, if I got it, it'd be fine. If I didn't, it would be fine. But when I found myself in in final rounds in big situations, it was like there was getting in my own way.
Yeah, I definitely maybe can relate to that. I feel like I've almost had the opposite experience, because whenever I've tried to be like, all right, no pressure, I can just like, doesn't matter if this works out or not, let me just, not wing it, but let me just go in with that attitude. For some reason, that's never held up under pressure for me.
Uh-huh.
And when I've sort of not created a pressure situation, but was like, all right, I really care about doing as close to my potential as I can in a given situation and really, really go for it. More often than not, those were the times that it actually panned out. And the sort of more relaxed pressure ones have always gone worse.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know if that's just because I just, I don't know.
So when you say you're frustrated with how you're playing in auditions, that was like relative to your level of preparation?
I think so. It was like whatever I thought I was doing, then it would just kind of crumble in the moment. And I was like, maybe I'm just not like trying hard enough or working in the right ways.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, all right, let me just like get a little more serious about that. And that seemed to help. But I was a little slow going getting to the audition thing in the first place anyway. So maybe it was just my own mental, just like, thought I was going to be doing something else, and that was kind of like snailing my way into taking it seriously.
It's all relative.
Yeah, it's like, who the heck knows? Like,
Well, that's great, because I'm always interested to talk to somebody who is at least, I mean, you're a little too young to call you a late bloomer, but at the same time, it's hard to learn very much from people who one day they're in their senior year at Juilliard, and the next day they're in a big job.
Yeah, that definitely
was
not me. Yeah,
it's hard.
Sure.
It's hard to learn
Yeah.
from that. Whereas somebody who's taken a few knocks and maybe accumulated a little bit of scar tissue and figured out how to work through that, you can learn from those people.
Yeah, definitely.
Anything else in your audition preparation you'd point to that?
Well, in recent years, I started doing much more mock auditions than I had done in the past.
Uh-huh.
And I always would try to do a few where I'd, simulate even just like trying to find my, I don't know, spike point, whatever you want to call it, like try to find, and I've done this with concerts too, but like, for example, I realized, and this may be for other people too, but it's like, when you're in the warm-up room and then you hear the, like,
Mm-hmm.
I found that would be the first point in the day where the heart rate would actually really escalate.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started trying to simulate that a little more in mocks, in certain visualization type things with
Mocks with other people?
Yeah, like
Okay.
I try to, make somebody,
committee.
sit me in a room and then like simulate, like have them knock when
Yeah.
I don't know what's coming, so I can practice like visualizing myself not spiking when I hear the knock,
Yeah.
for example. And everybody's, I think, spike points can be different. It could be like when you actually walk on stage, it spikes, or when you finish your first excerpt, it spikes. For me, it was like the knock, and then after like the exposition or first excerpt, sometimes you sort of realize like where you are, and then it can spike again. So I spend time visualizing those moments so that I don't spike. And for concerts, I realized it was like, if I was going to play pictures or Mahler 5 or something where the trumpet starts, I noticed that it was like the first rehearsal, as soon as the tuning notes started, then all of a sudden the adrenaline would kick in a different way. So I would just spend time, as detailed as I could, seeing myself hearing the tuning note in my chair and not having any spike, and I found that to help.
You know what this reminds me of, and this is something I've actually kind of been thinking about, and maybe why it reminds me of that, is the Navy SEALs, the 4 pillars of mental toughness.
Oh.
Visualization, goal setting. But the one that is the arousal control is the one
It's
just being able to respond to that feeling of, Now, do you have techniques for that?
I mean, I would say for me, if I get that
Positive
like,
self-talk. That's the
oh,
one I was
yeah.
forgetting.
No, I mean, if I get the feeling of like, oh God, I mean, for me, once I'm in that zone, maybe I have some things that I can do to try to calm myself down, but I've found that if I can prevent ever getting to that point, then I've got a chance to like
Yes.
sound relaxed. So all of my work is to basically find ways to avoid that feeling. Because as soon as I've got that, I can play through that. And I think, everybody develops their own ways of playing through that, or playing through nerves, if you call it that. And I certainly can, but there's still a difference between.
Not the same
it's
thing
just not the same as you nervous versus you not nervous. So I in recent years, it's been more the like aggressive visualization of stuff like leaving my apartment with like 6 trumpets on me and a lot of weight on your shoulders, and not starting to like get a little hyped up. Like, so even going through those moments, it sounds dumb, and I don't think this is like revolutionary. I mean, a lot of people have talked about doing this kind of stuff, and I never really did that when I was younger. I don't think I quite knew for me what visualization meant, and it was through some experimenting of like how specifically detailed I had to get before it actually would work. So I think I used to just try to do the Don Green centering thing and like visualize kind of, and that would sort of work, but it wasn't until I started really being like hyper specific that I found it to actually result in being more calm in the moments. It was a little bit of slow going road for me in this department, but
But I think it's a really great thing for people to hear you talk about, because he's good. And that to hear people that actually have to change themselves, that they have to make something work. There's people who are just like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
so the thing that the SEALs do for that point where the spike occurred, and I've never heard the term that spike, but
I don't know. I'm probably just winging it.
No,
with
I
that,
think,
but
I think it's valuable. But their technique is breathing on the square. So you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4.
Is that like that box breathe? Is that the same thing as box? Okay.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, if that takes 4 bars and you've got to play in 2 bars, obviously that doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, it's still, I still get nervous, and I still get certain or varying levels of adrenaline when I play, and I think I know where my point of the amount of nerves or adrenaline I can handle and still sound like I'm not nervous. And then obviously there's always that point where you can cross the line, but I just, as much as I can, I just try to do whatever I can do to avoid getting to that point in the first place, because it's just not fun. I don't think. I mean, in auditions, there's always a certain level of that intensity, no matter what you do.
And I'm especially glad to hear you talk about it, because I think for a lot of players, talking about that or that's like almost an admission of weakness. That their nerves are an issue, but.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's people out there that are like, I legit do not get nervous, period, and like more power to them. But I'm sure everybody's dealing with it in varying degrees, and like I've certainly fluctuated over the years in terms of the amount of nerves that would like influence things. And like generally speaking, like on an average show, there's adrenaline, but it's not like anything crippling. But like depending on what I have to play, if I don't plan for it, I can't just like wing it and like have the kind of chops that make me feel so relaxed that like I can just, you know what I mean? I have to kind of plan for it. Then I'm in,
so coming back to the top of the circle here. Yeah. The thing about your audition that was so impressive, and I've always tell students, you can't just play the notes. You can't just play the note. You can't perfect your way into the Pittsburgh Symphony. You can't perfect your way into the Indianapolis Symphony. You've got to bring something to the party. That was your audition, was bringing all these different musical characters, just this whole palette. Do you think there's a connection to jazz?
I think so. I think the amount of listening that you have to do early on in life to be able to like hear a swing feel and then actually develop it so that it sounds like real versus like close. Yeah. It's kind of like when you hear about kids learning Spanish or German at 5 versus 25, like the kids smoke, like it could be a brain surgeon that's trying to learn a language at 30, but the inflection will never quite be right. And I think the amount of listening that you have to do that with jazz, especially early, just helps. It just helps the way you kind of hear stuff. And even simple classical things like trumpet fanfares, there's still like a certain like feel to those, and you can have a great sound and play great and get jobs and do really well in this industry sort of without a great feel. And there's people that do, but I think investing in trying to like listen for that can influence the way that you play anything really. And I think
a level of specificity,
maybe, or just the like, why does X, Y, and Z person always just sound like they're kind of tapping into the sweet spot of an excerpt or of a style? And I think the jazz thing can kind of help you tap into that even easier, because it sort of pushes you even further in that direction.
And rhythm.
I think the same way with that. And you can hear it in all the greatest classical players all have like the tap into that feel, whether they can play jazz or not.
And a great jazz player where you hear them in the middle of something and you think, how are they going to land this? But then they hit the post.
Yeah.
It's like blah, 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 bam.
Yeah. And I think it also, like, jazz in general can kind of help you almost like be able to keep your ear out in front of your own brain and your playing, because when you improvise, you sort of have to be ahead of almost your instrument, which that helps train your ear to be out in front of what you're doing, so then when you come in on something, you're already like there, as opposed to like
listening,
playing and hearing at the same time.
Listening to what you just did.
Exactly, and then you're either too slow to react, or it's like you're reacting to your own. Oops, that was a little low. So let me bring. It's like you kind of. So I don't know if that.
So pay attention to that. That fits.
If that, I don't know if that's it, but that's sort of kind of how. I think maybe it's helped, or how I try to apply it. And some of my favorite trumpet players that I've studied with or kind of emulated over the years always have really, in their own words or their own way, have found a way to kind of prioritize this type of listening and playing and approach. And some of them are really good jazz players, and some of them don't play jazz at all, but still play chamber music or orchestral music with like a swing to it, but they have like a feel to it, and so I've always kind of gravitated towards that.
So let's say you're teaching. How can you teach that? How do you teach that?
I think you can. I think it is mostly like convincing the person of the value of like listening a lot, so that you can help this with like, here's an example of somebody who plays the William Tell fanfare with like a pocket and a feel, and here's somebody who is a great player that does not have it, and being things like that.
Let's name who those people are.
No, like, but it's even. So it can be like, if you line up, 10 examples of different styles of music with the A-B, that can sort of maybe fast track somebody's ears to hear it. But I think the best way is just convincing somebody of the value of like listening a ton, so that they start to be able to kind of process music in that way. And I think, the more you are around orchestras that are really, doing something, the more you're around musicians that hear like that, which is really fun to play in orchestras like that. I find, or work with conductors that operate like that.
It's a pretty good way to make a living.
So yeah, but yeah, easier said than done. I think some of this stuff, but I think just listening a ton as sort of almost the primary goal as early as you possibly can is maybe the best way. At least I feel. I wish I had done it much more than I did, but I think the amount that I did is where I would get a lot of this stuff from in the first place. So
how's your tour been?
Oh yeah, it's been great. It's my first time doing something like this, and my first time in literally all these places and halls. So for me, there's that element of just like, wow, this is really amazing to see all this stuff for the first time, but also just kind of the growing pains of like all the things you learn from going through something like this for the first time, and the adjustments you'll make, for next time, whether it's either how you take care of yourself or how you plan for certain things. I, try to be thoughtful before this all kicked off, but you still can't help but
You seem like you
learn
take care of yourself.
Learn a lot of things, though. I mean, of just like, going through something like this. So it's been cool. I mean,
Yeah.
I've loved checking out all the different acoustics and.
Favorite acoustic so far?
I think I like the Elb Philharmonic the best, only because that was the hall so far that I felt like really could sort of take the extremes of like what you'd go for, and I feel like a lot of the things that either we're being told to do or we are trying to do anyways, there was like a little more room in that hall to go for it or try it. I don't know.
Really interesting hall.
And here, I don't know, but a lot of the halls I've enjoyed because I'm hearing new things in all the spaces, and some you get a lot more strings, some you get a lot more winds. Where I sit, I'm always getting a lot of trombones anyway, but some of those halls, it even changes the way I'm hearing harmony from behind me, which is cool.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's been cool. I've enjoyed that part of it. Some halls feel one way when you're warming up by yourself on stage, and then totally different with the orchestra.
Yeah.
And so I loved noodling around on the hall last night in Cologne, and then with the orchestra it was like cool, but that was my favorite place to just play by myself.
Yeah.
But the others have been more, so anyway. So it's just
Wait till we get to music Friday and Berlin.
Holy cow! Yeah.
So, I don't want to keep you forever.
Oh, no,
We've
no.
got a concert, and this is. I think I probably said that this is the last concert of our tour. We're in Wiesbaden. Tomorrow night's Vienna, and then we're home. Any particular words of advice from someone now? You were 2016 at Indianapolis?
Yeah.
So, and that was how far out of school? A couple of years?
Yeah, a few years. My first job was in the Tucson Symphony, and I was there for 2.5 years, and then I did a 1-year position in the San Francisco Ballet and played a little bit with the opera in the summer before moving to Indianapolis. So kind of bounced around a little bit.
So it's a respectable trajectory, Tucson, Indy, Pittsburgh. Words of advice.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think the advice that resonated with me, that I think I relied on the most through all of this, was just sort of the value in prioritizing, like listening and trying to be as good of a musician as you can. And I think my teachers when I was younger were really into that kind of message, and through college and things like that, I had similar type of priority placed on like fundamentals and musical just brain and ears and things like that. And maybe it's just because I was told that's sort of the priority of the totem pole, but I just felt like investing a lot in listening and fundamentals and things like that was the thing that helped always. Because I think if that stuff is the priority, it gives you way more tools to deal with an array of issues, whether it's on the instrument or just trying to figure out how to function. And like I had to do a ton of different things and still do. And I think the more that the ear is involved and the more the fundamentals are involved, it gives you a chance to find a way to deal with things.
And what's valuable and educational about this, I think, in terms of my students, is the degree to which everything that you've said is independent of what instrument it could be.
I think so. Yeah.
That not really once have you mentioned any particular technical difficulties with the trumpet or any attributes of the trumpet. I mean, that's its own thing.
Yeah, I got plenty of those issues on the instrument, but I think all this stuff helps address that the best you can.
One of my favorite things is with an interview that Pat Metheny gave years and years ago, where they were asking him about his amp and his pedals and blah.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I'll tell you everything you want to know, but that's not really important. He said, music is food, guitar's a fork.
Oh.
And so we each have our forks, but that's not really the most important thing.
Yeah. So I think that's been the main thing that was conveyed to me, that I, anytime I'm teaching or if somebody asks me that and wants to, know what I'm thinking about, that's the stuff, because it even does influence like all the nerdy side of things, which I'm very much, try to invest in all the musical stuff, and also making sure all my tools are dialed in for my own body. Everybody's different. Everybody's teeth are different. Jaw, And I think if your ear is engaged, it can help steer you into not going down like rabbit holes with your equipment, you know, because I think it's important to dial that stuff in too. And especially because sometimes there's people that are like, all right, well, orchestra players, you got to play this. And you're like, well, what if this mouthpiece doesn't work on my face? What do I do? And you kind of need to have a way to sort that out with feeling like, without you're just going like, oh shoot, does this sound better than this? Because then you're toast.
Right.
You know, it's got to be a little more specific. So yeah, I think it helps kind of everything, this type of.
Well, that's great, and I especially like that we managed to have a conversation after my initial point, which was how do you make the committee hear Telemann and Bruckner and Mahler and Shostakovich, and not just hear Conrad Jones, and I think that's great, and. I think we'll cut it off and let you get ready for the concert and have a great trip home.
Well, likewise, and yeah, this is a treat.
See you back in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Go get 'em.